Imagine firing your veteran director to clear the way for a mistake worth tens of millions of dollars, only to wake up and realize you just handed me the keys to your empire. They thought I was just a rigid obstacle called compliance. They had no idea my signature was the only thing keeping their paper castle from burning down. Pour yourself a bourbon. Watching an arrogant executive accidentally sign over absolute power is a true masterpiece. Hello, dear listeners of Boss Revenge Stories. We are truly sincere in thanking you for your continuous support. But sadly, YouTube has disabled the monetization feature on our channel, leaving us completely without a budget to operate. If you find today's story engaging, please consider supporting us with just $1, so we have the funds to pay our dedicated staff for their living expenses and continue creating these revenge stories for you. You can donate by scanning the PayPal QR code currently on your screen, or by clicking the PayPal link in the description or the comments section of this video. My name is Mia Moore. I am 38 years old, and until a very specific Tuesday morning, I was the Director of Risk Management and Compliance at Vanguard Renewables. Vanguard was one of those hyper-growth solar energy technology startups based in Texas, the kind of place that thought putting cold brew on tap and beanbag chairs in the lobby made up for 80-hour work weeks. My job was simple in theory, but despised in practice. I was the adult in the room. In a company obsessed with disrupting the energy grid, my entire purpose was to make sure we did not accidentally blow it up. In the toxic ecosystem of modern startups, compliance is treated like a disease. Our newly appointed Chief Executive Officer was Sloane Sterling. She was 32 years old and walked like she had a permanent spotlight following her. Sloane was the ultimate tech entrepreneur caricature. She wore spotless white designer sneakers with tailored suits, spoke exclusively in sound bites meant for a TED Talk, and possessed a terrifying obsession with speed. To Sloane, breaking boundaries was not just a motto, it was a religion. She viewed traditional, rigorous safety testing processes not as vital consumer protections, but as annoying bureaucratic speed bumps meant for lesser minds. She wanted everything faster, sleeker, and more disruptive, completely ignoring the fact that we were dealing with high-voltage electricity in people's homes. The turning point happened during an all-hands meeting. The entire company was crammed into the main atrium. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and forced enthusiasm. Sloane stood at the center, holding a microphone like a tech messiah, pacing back and forth in front of a massive digital display. The presentation was drowning in meaningless corporate buzzwords. Then, she dropped the bomb. She proudly announced to the entire staff that Vanguard would be launching our flagship product, a next-generation artificial intelligence-controlled microinverter, exactly 6 months earlier than our projected schedule. The room instantly erupted into cheers. Exhausted engineers and caffeinated marketing managers clapped wildly, blinded by the promise of early stock options and industry dominance. I sat in the third row, my hands neatly folded in my lap, completely silent. I did not clap. I did not smile. I was the only person in that massive room who knew the dark truth about that product. I had read the unredacted thermal diagnostic reports just 24 hours earlier. The highly praised artificial intelligence prototype had a fatal flaw. When the system was pushed to run at maximum capacity, the artificial intelligence would aggressively override the physical cooling protocols in order to prioritize maximum energy output. It caused the physical hardware to dangerously overheat. It was not a minor software bug. It was a guaranteed fire hazard. Putting that unit on the side of a family home and running it at full power was essentially planting a time bomb. Sloane stopped pacing. The applause began to die down as her eyes scanned the crowd and locked directly onto me. She knew I had seen the reports. She knew I was the one holding the red flag. She lifted the microphone, flashing a predatory, rehearsed smile that did not reach her cold eyes. To achieve this level of unprecedented hypergrowth, we must violently shed the archaic mindsets that tie us down, Sloane declared, making sure her voice echoed loudly against the glass walls. Those old ways of thinking, the rigid mentalities that fear innovation and hold back progress, they have absolutely no place in the future of this company. Every single head in the room subtly shifted in my direction. They all knew exactly who the rigid mentality was. I maintained eye contact with her, my face completely neutral. I refused to give her the satisfaction of a visible reaction. As the meeting finally dismissed into a chaotic chatter of fake excitement, Sloane did not waste a single second. She marched toward her pristine, soundproof glass office overlooking the manufacturing floor. She turned her head slightly and addressed me loudly enough for the executive team to hear. "Mia, in my office right now," Sloane said smoothly. "We need to restructure your career trajectory." She thought she was being clever. She thought she was about to execute a flawless corporate execution to clear the path for her blazing success. I quietly stood up, smoothed out my tailored skirt, and followed her into the glass box. I knew exactly what was coming. The glass door clicked shut behind me, instantly cutting off the low hum of the manufacturing floor. The silence inside the office was heavy and manufactured, engineered to make anyone standing on my side of the room feel small. Sloane seated herself behind a massive reclaimed oak desk. She did not offer me a chair. I pulled one out and sat down anyway, keeping my posture entirely neutral. "Mia," Sloane began, her tone dripping with a meticulously rehearsed empathy. She reached into her top drawer and pulled out a thick, ivory envelope. She placed her manicured fingertips on top of it and slowly pushed it across the smooth wooden surface toward me. The sound of the heavy paper sliding against the polished wood echoed in the quiet room. Her lips were downturned in a theatrical display of corporate sorrow, but her eyes betrayed her completely. They were bright, hungry, and entirely triumphant. She was looking at me the way an apex predator looks at a trapped animal. Every movement she made was calculated to assert dominance. "This is never the easy part of leadership," Sloane sighed, leaning back in her ergonomic leather chair to create physical distance between us. "You have been with us since the early days. You built the foundation here. But as we pivot towards this aggressive hyper-growth phase, we require absolute alignment across all executive branches. I am letting you go. We are offering you a standard severance package consisting of 3 months of your base salary, plus full outplacement services." 3 months. She was attempting to buy my silence and my swift departure with 90 days of pay. It was almost insulting how cheaply she valued my exit, but I needed to play my part flawlessly. Every micro-expression on my face mattered in this exact moment. I allowed my shoulders to drop a fraction of an inch. I let the practiced stoicism drain from my features, replacing it with the exact look of a dedicated employee whose entire world had just collapsed. I made sure my breathing became slightly erratic. "I do not understand," I whispered, forcing a slight, highly convincing tremor into my voice. "Is this because of my performance metrics? Did I fail somewhere? Is it the safety reports? I was only doing my job. I can adapt. I can work harder. Please, tell me if this is my fault." The frantic, desperate tone was precisely what she wanted to hear. It fed her massive ego and confirmed her superiority. Sloane raised a hand, stopping my faux panic with a patronizing gesture. She wanted this execution over with quickly. Every minute I spent in this office was a minute she was not out there finalizing her fast-tracked launch. She needed a clean, undisputed break with zero friction. "Mia, stop," Sloane said, her voice adopting a firm maternal cadence that made my skin crawl. "This has absolutely nothing to do with your competence. Your performance metrics are flawless. You are brilliant at what you do. But this company is evolving into a different beast entirely. You simply do not fit the new cultural vision. Your methodology is too cautious for our new trajectory. I want to be abundantly clear so there is no confusion or bad blood between us. You are not being fired for poor performance. This is strictly a termination without cause. We are just moving in different directions." Termination without cause. There it was. The golden phrase. The exact legal terminology I needed her to verbalize and document. By explicitly defining it as a termination without cause, Sloane believed she was legally insulating herself against any wrongful termination or whistleblower retaliation lawsuits I might try to file later. She thought she was building an impenetrable shield of corporate jargon. She had no idea she was actually handing me a loaded weapon. I took a shaky breath, looking down at my lap before slowly reaching for the envelope. My hands trembled perfectly as I pulled out the crisp, printed pages. I skimmed the dense legal jargon until I found the specific clause regarding the nature of the dismissal. There was a small box next to the words indicating it was without cause. It was neatly checked. "Okay," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, staring blankly at the paper. "Okay, I understand. If my performance is truly not the issue, and this is strictly without cause, I just need one final thing from you to make this official. Could you please sign the confirmation section right here with a blue pen, if you have one?" Sloane frowned slightly, her perfectly arched eyebrows knitting together in brief confusion. "Why blue ink?" "The State Unemployment Office," I lied effortlessly, looking up at her with wide, defeated eyes. "They are notoriously difficult about photocopied documents. A fresh signature in blue ink proves it is the original document and not a copy. It will just give me some peace of mind when I file my unemployment insurance claim tomorrow morning. Please, it is the least you can do for me." Mentioning the unemployment office was the perfect psychological touch. It painted me as small, financially desperate, and immediately reliant on government assistance. It completely erased any lingering suspicion she might have had about my compliance. Sloane let out a small, almost inaudible scoff of amusement. She opened her desk drawer and retrieved a heavy, silver fountain pen. Without bothering to read the fine print of the page I had pushed back toward her, she uncapped the pen. The metal nib scratched smoothly against the thick paper. She signed her full name with an aggressive, sweeping flourish. The deep blue ink settled into the fibers of the paper. She recapped the pen and pushed the document back to me. Her posture relaxed entirely. The tension in her shoulders vanished into thin air. She smiled, a genuine, terrifyingly bright smile, thoroughly convinced she had just permanently eradicated the final obstacle in her path. I carefully folded the paper, feeling the fresh, slightly raised ink against my fingertips, and placed it securely into my leather bag. She thought she had won. She did not realize the trap had not just been set. It had been flawlessly sprung. The walk of shame is a time-honored corporate ritual. A burly security guard escorted me to the main elevator, his hand hovering awkwardly near his radio as if I might suddenly attempt to steal a potted plant or a company laptop. I carried nothing but my personal leather tote bag. There was no pathetic cardboard box filled with coffee mugs or motivational desk calendars. I had purposely kept my workspace entirely sterile for the past 6 months, anticipating this exact outcome. The heavy glass doors of the lobby slid shut behind me, effectively sealing me out of the building. I did not look back. I simply crossed the busy 4-lane avenue, dodging the chaotic lunchtime traffic, and walked into the independent coffee roaster located directly opposite the Vanguard headquarters. The bell above the heavy wooden door chimed cheerfully, a stark contrast to the oppressive, manufactured silence of the executive office I had just left. The air inside smelled rich, full of roasted beans and burnt milk. I walked to the counter, ordered a double espresso, paid with exact cash, and took a seat at a high-top table directly facing the expansive front window. Through the glass, I had a perfect, unobstructed view of the towering Vanguard logo gleaming arrogantly in the bright Texas sun. I pulled my sleek personal laptop from my bag, set it on the reclaimed wood table, and flipped it open. The screen flared to life, illuminating my face. To truly understand the gravity of the weapon I was about to unleash, you have to rewind the clock exactly 4 years. Vanguard Renewables was not always a glittering unicorn startup practically printing money. Back then, we were violently bleeding capital. We were exactly 3 weeks away from completely missing payroll and declaring absolute, unrecoverable bankruptcy. The original founder, a chaotic but brilliant engineer, was drowning in personal debt and facing a total employee mutiny. He absolutely could not afford to pay me my heavily negotiated performance bonuses. I was exhausted, severely underpaid, and ready to walk away forever. Desperate to keep his only competent risk manager on board to navigate the legal minefield of insolvency, He offered me a radical compromise. We drafted a highly classified, heavily encrypted contract appendix. He called it the Founder's Covenant. It was a brilliantly paranoid piece of legal architecture, designed specifically to protect me from future hostile takeovers and the inevitable arrival of arrogant new management. The covenant explicitly stated that if I were ever terminated without cause during a major executive transition, all of my accrued, unpaid sweat equity would instantaneously convert. It would not convert into a meaningless, heavily taxed cash payout. It would convert into exactly 10% of the company's total voting shares. It was a dormant volcano hidden deep beneath the company's foundational corporate charter. Now, returning to the present moment, I took a slow, deliberate sip of my bitter espresso. Feeling the caffeine hit my bloodstream, I bypassed the public wireless network and connected directly to my secure, encrypted mobile hotspot. Because Sloan was so incredibly obsessed with rushing my exit to fast-track her disastrous product launch, her technology department had not yet processed the paperwork to revoke my administrative access. But honestly, even if they had, it would not have mattered in the slightest. My administrative credentials were tied directly to the Federal Securities and Exchange Commission compliance portal. That was a completely independent, government-mandated server that Sloan had absolutely no jurisdiction over. I logged into the Federal Registry. The interface was clunky, gray, and aggressively outdated. A beautiful contrast to the sleek, practically useless interfaces my former company prided itself on building. I reached into my leather bag and retrieved the crisp termination agreement. Using a high-resolution scanning application on my phone, I digitized the document. The deep blue ink of Sloan's aggressive, sweeping signature stood out vividly against the stark white background of the digital scan. I securely uploaded the encrypted file directly into the designated trigger folder of the Covenant. The screen displayed a small, blue loading bar. It felt agonizingly slow, stretching the tension in my chest, but in reality, the upload took less than 30 seconds. A harsh green text box flashed across the center of my screen. The protocol was officially active. The true beauty of the Founder's Covenant was its automated, cold-blooded ruthlessness. It bypassed the board of directors entirely. Once the requisite proof of a termination without cause was uploaded and cryptographically verified by the federal system, the execution was instantaneous and completely irreversible. I checked the digital display on my watch. I gave the system exactly 15 minutes to complete its cycle. During those 15 minutes, the automated clearinghouse processed the legally binding mandate. The central shareholder registry literally rewrote itself in the cloud. Millions of shares shifted columns in the dark, bypassing every fail-safe the company had installed. Across the street, up in her pristine, soundproof glass box, Sloan was undoubtedly popping a bottle of expensive champagne, toasting to her undeniable genius and her newly cleared path. She thought she was entirely untouchable. She had no idea that while the golden bubbles were still rising in her crystal flute, the ground beneath her designer sneakers had completely evaporated. She did not just fire a problematic employee. She had just formally inaugurated her new largest individual shareholder, and I had absolutely zero intention of remaining a silent partner. Monday morning arrived with the kind of aggressive, blind optimism that only a dangerously mismanaged technology company could possibly muster. I was not physically present in the building, of course, but the exact timeline of the impending disaster was meticulously pieced together later from internal server logs, encrypted chat transcripts, and the terrified testimonies of junior developers. At exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, the atmosphere in the Vanguard Engineering Hub was practically vibrating with toxic anticipation. Sloan strode into the main control room like a conquering general. She was completely ready to play God and rewrite the energy sector, surrounded by exhausted coders running on nothing but energy drinks and fear. She confidently gave the green light to the lead developer to push the new artificial intelligence source code directly to the active test grid. The developer nervously hit the execute command. The room held its breath, waiting for the celebratory dashboard to light up. Instead of the cascading green confirmation lights they expected to see, the massive central monitor violently flashed a hard, unforgiving crimson red. The entire system locked down instantly. A massive error prompt overrode the deployment protocol. It read in stark, undeniable white letters that immediate approval from the board of directors was strictly required due to a major capitalization structure change. Sloane was absolutely furious. The veins in her neck bulged as she screamed, demanding to know exactly who had dared to touch the system architecture over the weekend, before the terrified lead engineer could even stammer out a desperate denial. The heavy glass doors of the control room were violently shoved open. It was Marcus, our chief legal officer. Marcus was typically Sloane's most reliable, cold-blooded corporate attack dog. He was a man who usually wore expensive tailored suits and bragged openly about crushing small vendors in court. But Marcus was not snarling today. He looked as though he had just sprinted a full marathon in a sauna. He was visibly sweating profusely. His expensive silk tie was torn loose, and his face was the sickly color of wet ash. He completely bypassed the confused engineers and aggressively dragged Sloane out into the soundproof glass corridor. He did not care at all who was watching them through the transparent walls. He practically choked on his own words as he delivered the fatal, world-ending blow. The automated Federal Clearinghouse had officially finalized a permanent transaction over the weekend. The company's central corporate registry now legally recognized me as the single largest individual shareholder on the planet, officially wielding exactly 10% of the total voting rights. The sheer reality of that statement had not even fully registered in Sloane's arrogant mind when the first digital bomb detonated right in her pocket. Her sleek mobile phone began to vibrate violently against her hip. A split second later, Marcus's phone began to ring loudly. Then, as if orchestrated by a cruel conductor, every single office landline in the executive suite began to light up and ring in a synchronized, deafening panic. The automated Federal Exchange system had not just quietly updated our internal private records, it had simultaneously broadcasted the massive structural update to all of our institutional investors. The aggressive venture capitalists, who had blindly pumped tens of millions of dollars into Vanguard Renewables, were now staring at their automated morning financial briefings. They were collectively realizing that they had just suffered a massive, completely unannounced stock dilution. These were ruthless financiers who absolutely did not tolerate surprises. They were actively demanding immediate answers, screaming into their phones about catastrophic breaches of fiduciary duty, and explicitly threatening immediate financial withdrawal. Sloane's beautiful paper castle was officially catching fire from every conceivable angle. While Vanguard headquarters rapidly devolved into a state of absolute, unmanageable chaos, I was sitting perfectly comfortably on my back patio, enjoying the crisp morning breeze and a second cup of jasmine tea. My personal mobile phone sat quietly on the glass patio table. I watched the screen light up with an incoming call from Sloane. I let it ring. It went straight to voicemail. 2 minutes later, she called again. Over the span of 45 minutes, she left me exactly 5 voicemails. I listened to all of them back to back while I watered my orchids. It was a deeply fascinating psychological study of a raging narcissist experiencing a total, catastrophic loss of control. The first voicemail was completely delusional, attempting to sound powerful and authoritative. "Get back to this office right now and fix this pathetic clerical error," she barked. The second voicemail, arriving exactly 20 minutes later, was heavily laced with pure venom. "I will bury you in so much litigation you will not be able to afford breathing," she screamed wildly. "This is corporate espionage and criminal fraud." The third and fourth calls were frantic, a jumbled, pathetic mess of heavy breathing and desperate demands to know exactly how I had bypassed the entire legal department. By the fifth and final voicemail, her signature arrogance had entirely evaporated into the ether. She was genuinely begging. "Please, just answer me." Her voice cracked and trembled pitifully. "We can fix this quietly. Let us just negotiate a private settlement before the board members arrive." I felt absolutely zero pity for her. I did not return a single phone call. I did not send a single text message. Instead, I calmly walked inside, opened my personal laptop, and drafted a single, perfectly structured email. I bypassed Sloan and Marcus entirely, sending the message directly to the encrypted personal addresses of the entire board of directors. I attached the cryptographically verified Federal Registry documents, the fully activated Founders Covenant, and the termination agreement proudly featuring Sloane's beautiful, fresh blue ink signature in the body of the email. I did not gloat, and I offered absolutely no elaborate explanations. I simply invoked my newly acquired legal authority as the majority individual shareholder and formally demanded an immediate emergency board meeting. I hit send, closed the laptop with a satisfying click, and smiled. The chessboard was set, and she had nowhere left to run. The immediate perk of suddenly holding an executive board seat was the unfettered, God-tier access to the company's deepest digital archives. Later that same Monday afternoon, sitting at my mahogany dining table, I securely logged into the executive data room. This was a highly encrypted server completely segregated from the regular employee network. It was the dark, silent space where the true, ugly mechanics of corporate governance were hidden away from the naive workforce. I did not log in to gloat over my newly acquired shares. I logged in because I needed to fundamentally understand the architecture of the urgency. Sloan was narcissistic, but she was not inherently suicidal. Rushing an untested, highly volatile hardware product into the commercial market 6 months early was reckless even for a Silicon Valley zealot. There had to be a massive, hidden financial incentive driving her madness. I spent 3 grueling hours methodically tearing through confidential board minutes, heavily encrypted financial forecasts, and restricted legal memorandums. The atmosphere in my quiet dining room shifted from calm to suffocating as I dug deeper into the digital paper trail. It felt exactly like picking the lock on a sealed vault and finding a ticking bomb inside. Then, I finally found it. It was buried deep under a masterfully obscured holding company name. But the legal fingerprints were unmistakable. The master file was labeled Project Zenith. Project Zenith was not an internal product launch strategy. It was a secret, fast-tracked acquisition agreement. Sloan was actively conspiring to sell Vanguard Renewables entirely to Omnicorp. Omnicorp was a ruthless global energy conglomerate, infamous for swallowing up innovative startups, gutting their staff, and absorbing their patents into their massive portfolio. But the true horror lay in the specific terms of the executive compensation structure attached to the buyout. If the sale went through, Sloan had aggressively negotiated an absolutely grotesque golden parachute for herself. She was set to personally pocket a staggering $50 million in a pure cash payout the moment the ink dried on the merger, after which she would immediately resign and vanish into the sunset, leaving the catastrophic engineering fallout to the new corporate owners. Suddenly, her sheer desperation to eliminate me made perfect, terrifying sense. I was the annoying, detail-oriented compliance officer blocking her path to a $50 million payday. She needed me gone so she could bury the failed safety reports. But Omnicorp was not run by fools. They were cautious corporate giants. Their legal team had inserted 2 heavily armored contingency clauses into the purchase agreement to protect their investment. First, the acquisition was strictly contingent on the successful, public market launch of our new artificial intelligence system, to mathematically prove its commercial viability. Second, and infinitely more critical, a merger of this magnitude legally required unanimous, 100% approval from all major shareholders. The contract explicitly defined a major shareholder as any individual or entity possessing more than 5% of the total voting stock. I sat back in my chair, the harsh glow of the monitor illuminating my face in the darkening room. The absolute irony of the situation was almost intoxicating. By firing me and unknowingly triggering the Founders Covenant, Sloan had handed me exactly 10% of the voting power. She had accidentally given me the absolute, legally binding power of veto. I held her entire $50 million exit strategy by the throat. The emergency board meeting I had demanded was scheduled for the following morning. I decided to drive to the downtown corporate building early to physically deliver the printed legal summons to the board secretary. The underground parking garage was dimly lit, echoing with the low hum of massive ventilation shafts and the distant drip of condensation. It was the perfect, isolated setting for a corporate thriller, and apparently, the perfect place for a desperate ambush. As I stepped out of my sedan, a dark figure stepped out from behind a concrete support pillar. It was Sloane. The polished, untouchable tech entrepreneur facade was entirely gone. She looked absolutely horrific. Her expensive tailored suit was deeply wrinkled. Her perfect hair was wildly disheveled, and she had dark, heavy bags under her bloodshot eyes. She had clearly not slept a single second since the exchange system alert went off. She looked exactly like a trapped animal cornered in a dark alleyway. "Mia!" "Wait," Sloane choked out, stepping into the harsh fluorescent light. Her voice was raspy, completely devoid of its usual booming, theatrical arrogance. She was practically hyperventilating, her eyes darting around the empty concrete garage to make sure there were no witnesses to her humiliation. I stopped, resting my hand calmly on the roof of my car, and looked at her with absolute, freezing detachment. "You are violating a dozen corporate governance protocols by approaching me outside of a sanctioned board environment. Sloane." "I do not care about protocols," she hissed. Taking a frantic, stumbling step forward, she raised her hands in a desperate, pleading gesture. "Listen to me. We do not have to do this in front of the board members. We can settle this right here, right now. I know what you want. You want the massive payout you were denied years ago. Fine. You win. I concede. I will buy your entire 10% stake directly from you. I will pay you exactly 3 times its current market valuation. Pure cash. Wired directly into your offshore accounts by noon tomorrow. You will be completely set for life. You will never have to work another day in your entire existence. All you have to do is sign a simple transfer agreement right now and quietly vote yes on the merger. 3 times the market value. It was an astronomical, life-altering sum of money. A few days ago, it might have been an incredibly tempting offer. It would have been the ultimate financial revenge, walking away rich while she dealt with the corporate mess. But looking at her pathetic, sweat-drenched face, the money suddenly meant absolutely nothing to me. My mind instantly flashed back to the unredacted thermal diagnostic reports I had secured on my hard drive. I thought about the sheer, terrifying scale of Omnicorp's national distribution network. Vanguard was currently just a regional player in Texas, but Omnicorp had millions of active residential contracts across the entire country. If I took her dirty money and allowed this merger to proceed, Omnicorp would blindly mass-produce Sloane's dangerously defective artificial intelligence system. They would strap those overheating units to the sides of hundreds of thousands of family homes, elementary schools, and hospitals. When the hardware eventually failed, under the massive strain of the summer heat, it would not just be a quiet corporate embarrassment. The artificial intelligence would override the safety protocols, and it would trigger a nationwide epidemic of catastrophic electrical fires. Innocent people would lose their homes. Families would be destroyed. People would die. Also, this hollow, arrogant woman standing in front of me could secure her $50 million escape pod. The narrative of my life had completely shifted in a matter of seconds. This was no longer just a clever revenge story about a wronged employee sticking it to a bad boss. The game board had massively expanded, and the stakes were now measured in human lives and lasting legacies. I looked directly into Sloane's panicked, bloodshot eyes, feeling a wave of absolute, unwavering authority wash over me. "This is not a negotiation," I stated flatly, my voice echoing coldly off the damp concrete walls. "Keep your blood money. I will see you in the boardroom." I turned my back on her and walked briskly toward the elevator banks, leaving the architect of her own destruction standing completely alone in the echoing darkness. The emergency board meeting commenced at exactly 10 o'clock in the morning. Because of the sheer magnitude of the crisis, the meeting was conducted via a highly secure, encrypted video conference. My screen was divided into a rigid grid of high-definition camera feeds. On one side, the tired, panicked faces of our veteran board members. On the other side, looking incredibly severe in their dark, immaculate suits, were the senior executives and legal counsel of Omnicorp. They had joined the call fully expecting to finalize their massive acquisition, their golden pens quite literally hovering over the digital contracts. And then there was Sloane. She was dialing in from her glass office, desperately attempting to project an aura of unshakable confidence. She had changed into a fresh suit and reapplied her makeup, trying to hide the absolute terror radiating from her eyes. As soon as the digital gavel fell to open the session, Sloane immediately launched into a preemptive strike. She forced a light, dismissive laugh that echoed awkwardly through the speakers of every person on the call. Gentlemen, before we proceed with the formal ratification of the Omnicorp merger, I want to briefly address the unexpected presence of a former employee on this executive call, Sloane said, waving her hand casually as if swatting away a minor insect. Mia Moore's recent appearance on our capitalization table is nothing more than a minor administrative misunderstanding regarding some outdated severance paperwork. Our legal team is already handling the retraction. I strongly suggest we do not let a disgruntled former compliance officer distract us from finalizing the most lucrative energy acquisition of the decade. I motion to immediately call for the final merger vote. I did not interrupt her. I let her finish her pathetic, transparent lie. I let the silence hang in the digital space for 3 agonizingly long seconds. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend my employment status. I simply reached forward and clicked a single button on my keyboard. As the verified holder of exactly 10% of the voting shares of this corporation, I am exercising my legal shareholder privilege to take emergency control of the primary presentation display, I stated, my voice completely devoid of emotion, cutting through the tension like a scalpel. The video grid instantly shifted, minimizing everyone's faces to the side. The main screen was immediately dominated by the stark, undeniable reality of the unredacted physical safety test reports. I had legally backed up every single file to an encrypted external drive the day before Sloane fired me, perfectly preserving the metadata. I am not here to discuss my severance package, I continued, speaking slowly and deliberately, so every single syllable landed with maximum impact. I am here to fulfill my fiduciary duty to the shareholders, and more importantly, to prevent Omnicorp from unwittingly purchasing a massive legal and ethical liability. What you are currently looking at on your screens are the original, unmanipulated thermal diagnostic reports for our new artificial intelligence microinverter system, the exact system Sloane Sterling is currently trying to sell to you as a finished, market-ready product. I highlighted a specific column of data in bright, undeniable yellow. As you can clearly see, when pushed to peak commercial capacity, the artificial intelligence aggressively overrides the physical cooling hardware. The resulting hardware failure rate is not a minor anomaly, it is exactly 40%, a 40% probability of catastrophic overheating. Sloane ordered the engineering department to permanently delete these reports and explicitly threatened to terminate anyone who spoke of them. She intentionally concealed a 40% fire risk solely to artificially inflate the valuation of this company and secure her $50 million in personal exit compensation. The reaction was instantaneous and utterly devastating. The chief executive officer of Omnicorp leaned so close to his webcam that his face distorted. His skin had turned a pale, sickly shade of gray. He was a man who managed risk for a living, and he had just realized he was inches away from strapping thousands of firebombs to residential homes under his own brand name. "Is this true?" the Omnicorp executive demanded, his voice trembling with sheer, unadulterated rage. He did not even wait for Sloane to formulate a lie. He turned directly to his lead legal counsel. "Terminate the agreement. Shut it all down immediately. We are completely withdrawing from this acquisition right now on live record." He turned his furious gaze back to Sloane's camera feed. "And Ms. Sterling, if we discover that you used the United States mail or digital wire systems to transmit fraudulent data to our firm during the due diligence period, we will not just sue you into bankruptcy, we will personally ensure the federal authorities prosecute you for criminal commercial fraud." The Omnicorp executives abruptly disconnected from the call. Their camera feeds went entirely black. The silence that followed was deafening. The deal of the century was dead. The Vanguard board members stared at their screens in absolute, horrified shock. They were cornered. They had just lost hundreds of millions of dollars in potential revenue, and they were suddenly holding a massive, highly dangerous scandal. The chairman of our board, a usually quiet, diplomatic man, unmuted his microphone. His face was entirely devoid of mercy. "Sloan," the chairman said coldly, "you are hereby terminated. We are not offering a severance package. We are not allowing you to quietly resign. You are being officially terminated with cause due to gross, malicious negligence. Every single one of your unvested stock options and bonus structures is completely nullified. Security is waiting outside your office door right now to escort you off the premises." Sloan opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her entire empire, her $50 million, her reputation, all completely evaporated in front of a live audience. The system administrator unceremoniously terminated her connection. Her box disappeared from the grid. She was gone. The remaining board members looked completely defeated. The chairman let out a long, exhausted sigh and looked directly at my camera feed. "Mia," he pleaded, his tone completely shifting from authoritative to desperate. "We need someone who knows the actual condition of this company. We need someone who can navigate this disaster. We are officially offering you the position of Chief Executive Officer. Name your salary." "I decline," I answered immediately, feeling a deep, profound sense of satisfaction. I have absolutely no desire to run the daily operations of this circus. However, I propose a different structure. I formally nominate David, our incredibly dedicated chief engineer, to be elevated to the position of Chief Executive Officer. He knows how to fix the hardware, and he actually cares about the end user. I paused, letting the weight of my final decree settle over them. As for myself, I will be retaining my 10% voting shares. Furthermore, I am independently appointing myself as the permanent chair of a newly formed Ethics and Safety Committee. Going forward, not a single piece of hardware, not a single line of code, and not a single corporate acquisition will ever be approved without my explicit written authorization. If anyone attempts to bypass safety for profit again, I will personally burn this company to the ground. The board quickly and unanimously voted in favor of my terms. They had absolutely no other choice. The future of the company had been violently reset. The paper castle had been completely torn down, and in its place, I had built an impenetrable fortress, and I held the only key. Thank you so very much for listening to today's story. Dear friends, please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. As I always love seeing our community from all around the world, if you enjoyed this journey of corporate justice, please consider supporting our team with just $1. You can easily do so by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen, or by using the PayPal link provided in the description or the comments section below. Your incredible generosity allows us to pay our dedicated staff, helping them feed their families while we continue to create even better stories for you. Thank you again, and see you in the next one.